Welcome to Bible Fiber, where we explore the textures and shades of the biblical tapestry. I'm Shelley Neese, president of the Jerusalem Connection, a Christian organization dedicated to sharing the stories of Israel's people, both ancient and modern. I'm also the author of the book, Bible Fiber, a 52-week study of the 12 minor prophets available on Amazon. This week's Torah portion covers Numbers 8:1 through 12:16. It begins with God's instructions on how to set up the tabernacle's golden 7-branched lampstand. The priests needed to make sure the 6 outer branches angled their light towards the central shaft to illuminate the table of showbread opposite. Back in Leviticus, God detailed exactly how the priests were to tend to the lamps with pure olive oil and regular wick trimming so that the light would perpetually burn. 13 centuries later, when the Greek king Antiochus Epiphanes desecrated the Second Temple in Jerusalem, his army extinguished the light on the menorah. Because of the command to keep the light regularly burning in the temple, the Jewish resistance, led by Judah Maccabee, made rekindling the lamp one of their first priorities once they reclaimed their sanctuary. Side note, the reason Hanukkah menorahs have 9 branches instead of 7 branches is because Jewish law prohibited making exact duplicates of temple vessels for common use outside the sanctuary. At this point in Numbers, it's been exactly a year since the former slaves left Egypt. Therefore, it is the inaugural anniversary of their redemption. Numbers 9 reminds them how they should celebrate the first Passover, including bringing the offerings to the tabernacle. God gave Moses a clear directive. Let the people of Israel keep the Passover at its appointed time, and on the 14th day of this month at twilight ye shall keep it at its appointed time according to all its statutes and all its rules you shall keep it. An issue came up involving eager participants in the Passover who had to delay their celebration because they were ritually unclean after being near a dead body. God, impressed by their earnestness to observe both the holiday and the ritual purity laws, gave them a makeup date for their Passover celebration. However, anyone who was ritually clean but simply chose to ignore the Passover was to be cut off from his people for failing to bring the offering at its appointed time. The text notes total compliance, stating that the Israelites did everything just as the Lord commanded Moses. Pausing to eat the lamb, the unleavened bread, and the bitter herbs must have been a moving reminder of the night the death angel passed over their homes in Egypt. They also had to be sure to leave no leftovers until morning and ensure that not a single bone of the sacrifice was broken. Sadly, after this first anniversary in the Sinai wilderness, Israel did not celebrate the Passover again for another 38 years, not until they finally crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land under Joshua. The Israelites couldn't celebrate the Passover because they failed to maintain the covenant sign of circumcision for the generation born in the desert. According to Exodus 12:48, circumcision was a strict, non-negotiable prerequisite for anyone participating in the feast. And because the ritual was entirely suspended during the decades of judgment, the nation was legally barred from keeping the Passover. The most memorable images in this portion come from the descriptions of God's presence hovering over the desert encampment as either a cloud or fire. By day, the presence appeared as a thick cloud that shielded the families from the blistering sun, and at night it transformed into a pillar of fire to provide light and warmth. This constant visual anchor gave the community daily reassurance that God was dwelling right in their midst. To manage the logistics of moving such a massive population, God gave the Israelites clear instructions on how to interpret his movements. In Numbers 9, the rules of the camp are simple. When the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the priests packed up the holy vessels, the tribes dismantled their tents, and the caravan set out. Wherever the cloud settled, they stopped and set up camp. Whether the cloud stayed in place for a single night, a month, or an entire year, the people remained right where they were, learning total dependency on divine timing. Because the camp was so large, God also instituted an audible signal system to ensure everyone knew when the cloud was moving. He commanded Moses to forge 2 hammered silver trumpets. When the priest blew short staccato blast, it served as an official alarm for specific tribes to break camp in a precise order. The combination of the visible cloud above and the sounding trumpets below kept the community a synchronized body, moving at the command of God. Despite the tangible proof of God's nearness, the people begin grumbling and protesting in a manner much heavier than in previous episodes. It started when the rabble among them nitpicked their diet. Rabble is non-Israelites. And remember, the encampment held a mixed multitude. But misery enjoys company, and the Israelites forgot the promises to their ancestors and began whining as well. For a year, they had eaten mostly manna in the Sinai, and their stomachs vetoed their faith. They wanted meat and vegetables. In Exodus 16, they had complained about a lack of food and accused Moses and Aaron of trying to starve them. Now they took issue with the monotony of their diet, not the quantity. Moses had a very pronounced breakdown in response to the demand for meat, much more so than he did with the episode of the golden calf or the prior complaints about food. Before this, he had led the people through serial breaches in their faith and not grown so depressed and forlorn. But this time he cries out to God and tells them that the burden is too heavy for him alone, and he asks God to go ahead and let him die rather than continue on this way. But why is he breaking down now, and why here? As anyone who has carried leadership responsibilities knows, it is the grand sum of the stress-producing events and not any one challenge and isolation that creates leadership burnout. I'll also note that, as a parent, whining is the thing that gets under my skin the quickest. Moses does feel as if they are his children, and he asks God, "Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant?" In response, God does not try to teach Moses a spiritual lesson through continued suffering. The text goes out of its way to acknowledge that Moses was a humble and great leader. God did not expect more from him. Instead, God does two very practical things. First, he redistributes the workload and makes Moses share the burden of leadership. God commands Moses to bring him 70 elders and gather them around the tent of meeting. In an act that almost foreshadows Pentecost, the Lord came down in a cloud, took some of the spirit that was on Moses, and let it rest on the 70 elders so that they too prophesied. Even 2 elders who did not make it to the tabernacle received the spirit within their own tents. Through the counsel of Jethro, Moses had already divided out the task of overseeing conflict with the people. What happened here was different. This was an imparting of the Spirit of God onto other leaders. Second, God made meat rain down. He tells the people, "You will not eat it for just 1 day or 2 days or 5, 10 or 20 days, but for a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it, because you have rejected the Lord." This was a real case of be careful what you wish for. The biblical account of the quail in Numbers 11 is a well-documented natural phenomenon in Egypt. Every autumn, massive flocks of game birds migrate from Europe and Asia across the Mediterranean Sea to winter in Africa. Because their short wings are poorly suited for long-distance endurance flights over open water, the birds pass along the Egyptian coastline and Sinai Peninsula completely exhausted. If they encounter a headwind, they burn through their energy reserves and literally drop from the sky. When the biblical text notes that a wind from the sea drove the quail into the Israelite camp, it perfectly describes what happens when the migratory flocks lose their flight capacity. Egyptian tomb paintings even depict local hunters capturing the grounded or low-flying birds by hand or with simple throw nets. Isn't that fascinating? When Joshua, Moses' aide at the time, witnessed the elders prophesying, he became jealous. The Bible doesn't explain why, but we can presume he felt defensive of Moses' leadership and worried the prophetic voices might counter those of Moses. Moses showed his wisdom, generated by age and experience, by telling Joshua to put aside any worries about competition. Moses said if it were up to him, everyone would be prophets. Interestingly, Joshua will later have his own struggle establishing himself as the appointed successor of Moses in the eyes of the people, and God will once again utilize miracles as a way of displaying his favor. I'm kind of jumping ahead again and starting to think that Joshua and Judges might need to be the next Bible Fiber series. More significant trials are ahead, though, and battles await. The cloud, the fire, the ark, the miracles, the prophecies, all are a means to deliver one important message. They are not alone. God is with them. His presence rests on them, and his power will deliver them. To readers of the New Testament, this tradition of transferring authority continued during the life of Jesus and after his ascension. As you know, Jesus bestowed power and authority onto his closest followers to drive out demons and heal the sick. In a gathering at the temple, much like the lineup of 70 elders with Moses, the people received the Spirit of the Lord and the ability to prophesy. Like Moses, we have to be humble enough in our own walk of faith to welcome the giftings of others and the sharing of spiritual responsibilities. The only thing that could quiet the thankless hearts and protesting spirits was the direct wisdom of God through the elect. That's it for this week. Join me next week in reading Numbers 13:1 to 15:41. If you would like to get the study questions that go with the reading, please visit our website at thejerusalemconnection.us. Shabbat Shalom and Am Israel Chai.